I have it as 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call the Capital Improvements and City Development Committee to order at 7 o'clock. Sitting on this committee are Councilors Dolan and Waterman. And the first thing we need to do is from the docket of January 19th, 2021, we have a order for a $943,000 loan for the SCADA system, and we need to refer that to the planning board for study and recommendation. And secondly, we have from the same docket, we have a loan order for $250,000 for the baseline flow monitoring for infiltration and inflow in the sewer system, and we need to refer that to the planning board for study and recommendation. Thirdly, we have a loan order for $372,000 for design, permitting, bidding, construction, oversight associated with the South Attleboro pumping station, and we need to refer that to the planning board for their study and recommendation. And fourth, from the docket of January 5th, 2021, we have a loan order for $505,000 to be appropriated for the bidding, permitting, subconsultant, engineering, and testing associated with the Rating River plant. And we need to refer that to the planning board for study and recommendation. And finally, Councilors Dolan and Waterman and the rest of the council, from the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to authorize the following resolution for the mayor to enter into a TIE agreement with 54 Union LLC pursuant to Mass General Law 40V, Section 4, Paragraph B, Subparagraph I, and Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5M. The following resolution: Attleboro Municipal Council resolution authorizing the tax increment exemption agreement for 54 Union Street LLC. Whereas 54 Union Street LLC, the owner of the building located at 54 Union Street, parcel 28-384-0, and 12 Denon Street, parcel 28-384-0A, and 28-34-0B in the city of Attleboro, is proposing to rehabilitate the existing historic industrial buildings into a market rate multifamily residential structure. The total investment at this location, including site acquisition, site preparation, environmental remediation, rehabilitation, and construction, will be approximately $10,113,200. And whereas 54 Union Street LLC is seeking to become a certified project in accordance with the Massachusetts Housing Development Incentive Program, and is seeking a tax increment exemption agreement from the city of Attleboro in accordance with the Massachusetts Housing Development Initiative Incentive Program and Massachusetts General Law Chapter 40V, and whereas the city of Attleboro strongly supports increased economic development within its downtown, restoring a blighted and mostly vacant historic mill building while increasing the market rate housing inventory within the city and expanding the consumer base for downtown businesses, and whereas the proposed redevelopment project meets the location and eligibility criteria set forth in the downtown Attleboro Housing Development Zone and Plan, and whereas the Economic Development Incentive Board has negotiated an agreement, voting unanimously to approve a tax increment exemption agreement structure for 54 Union Street LLC, and now recommends the authorization of said agreement and vote for the Municipal Council of the City of Attleboro. Now therefore be it resolved that the Municipal Council of the City of Attleboro hereby A, ratifies and authorizes the mayor to execute a tax increment exemption agreement pursuant to the Massachusetts Housing Development Incentive Program between 54 Union LLC and the City of Attleboro to further the redevelopment of the mill buildings located at the northeastern corner of Union and Dunham Streets, including the following parcels: A, 54 Union Street, which is Assessor's Parcel Map 28, Lot 384, Unit 0, and B, 12 Dunham Street, which is Assessor's Map Parcel 28, Lot 384, Unit 0A, and Assessors Map 28, Lot 384, Unit 0B, and B, authorizes the mayor or his designee to take such and other and further actions as may be necessary or appropriate to carry out the purposes of this resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Waterman. So I've asked Catherine Frederick, the City of Attleboro Community Development Director, to attend the committee meeting this evening to illustrate the process that the Economic Development Incentive Board has gone through and to fully explain what a tax increment exemption is. And with that, Catherine, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Councilor Conti, and I hope everyone can hear me okay. I had to switch to my phone audio. All right, great. I'm going to share my screen because I have a couple of visuals that I think will help to put this project in context. I'm going to go over really the basics of the Housing Development Incentive Program and then discuss the proposed tax increment exemption agreement. I also have the developer of this project, Jonathan Cousins, on the line, so he can speak to more specifics down the line. I'm going to share my screen now. Please let me know if it's sharing the correct screen because I've had this happen before where I've ended up sharing my emails. Does everybody see the PowerPoint presentation?
We do. And if you click on the bottom, it'll actually look like a slideshow. Like next to the elevator slide.
Yep.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you all. So this project has a fairly long timeline with us, and I wanted you all to be aware of this. This has not been a particularly recent endeavor, and you've actually met Jonathan before virtually over the summer when you were reviewing the Housing Development Incentive Program as a new incentive tool for the city to use. So this project, really, I became aware of it back in May of 2019. There were some internal negotiations on the project side that delayed our really discussing a tax increment exemption in earnest until autumn of 2019, I would say. That's when we were able to send that huge document that you all reviewed to DHCD for a preliminary review. And we did receive a couple of additional requests, items for clarification before we actually sent it to council, which was, again, horribly delayed due to COVID and also because there's only one economic development employee and I happened to be in the hospital with my son at the time. Anyway, we reviewed this and approved the HD zone and plan back in September of 2020. And what that does, it allows us to negotiate these tax increment exemptions at the local level. It also allows for these projects to seek state tax credits as well. This is part of a pretty complicated capital stack that a lot of these, adaptive reuse projects is what we call them, tend to need. It's not easy to redevelop a building that was built for another purpose, and particularly if it was an industrial purpose, and it often has some environmental remediation challenges that developers need to face. Recently, things have moved a lot more quickly. As of the end of October, we recorded the HD zone with the Registry of Deeds, and the very next night, we had the first meeting between the development team and the Economic Development Incentive Board, which is a 7-member body composed of several department heads and elected officials here within Attleboro. We had 2 meetings to negotiate the terms of this tax increment exemption, and we released the final approved tax increment exemption terms and got those accepted by the development team right before the end of the year. And I will go through those terms in a little bit, but just to refresh your understanding of the tool, a tax increment exemption means that as the value of this property increases, you take as a baseline what they're paying in taxes right now on the property. Anything above that is subject to a graduated abatement, meaning, in the early years when they don't have tenants, but they're still building, but the property is valued at a higher rate. You give them a higher break then towards the end of the term when their financing is about to be complete, and you step them down until they're paying the full amount of taxes that the new development would require. So that's just a brief explanation of the tool, as we discussed back in summer. The rationale for this project, first and foremost, without tax increment exemption and state HDIP credits, this project would be infeasible. It's an old structure. There are a lot of issues that they have to address, and it really would not make any economic sense for a developer to proceed on this project without this form of support. This is an adaptive reuse project. It converts a mostly vacant structure within our downtown into a new use. It doesn't damage or remove the character of the building. It keeps it as is, but brings it to new life with a new and more context-aware use. The brownfields remediation component, downtown Attleboro, as everybody here knows, it's been heavily industrial. A lot of jewelry manufacturing, a lot of TCEs and other chemicals are in our soil. This project is going to address some of that remedial contamination from the former use of the building. So that's a great benefit not only to the structure, but to the uses around it. There are going to be some market considerations, 43 new market rate households within walking distance of downtown businesses. That's nothing to sneeze at, as I'll show you later on with the demographic profile of our downtown. There's going to be a limited city investment here. There are existing roads, there are existing water, sewer services, close to fire, police services, very close, as a matter of fact. And, the public schools are going to probably not be used too much by the tenants that this development is seeking. So this is unlike single-family homes that are built in greenfield areas of the city, where you have to construct the road, you have to construct the water and the sewer. These are expenses that the city doesn't need to bear for this project. Everything is already there, and to some extent. Finally, there's less congestion than what you see with single-family homes. This project is built where it is because it's just a very short walk to the train station. So it's a heavily public transportation oriented development, and the target market that they're seeking is less interested in driving. So unlike single family homes, this is not going to be a market that's going to clog the roadways. The economics of the deal, the benefits to the tax base is number one. And without the project, we can expect to continue to see $250,000 roughly over the next 20 years in tax revenues from this deal. With the project, that's about 3 times as much over the next 20 years. And that's with the tie included. Yes, we're giving them a bit of a haircut, but I mean, it doesn't even seem fair to me to put the numbers up there for if the project were built without this relief, because it couldn't be built at all. Downstream benefits as well. As I mentioned before, there are 43 new and small households based on the unit mix, which is largely 1 and 2 bedroom and studio units. So these are really smaller family areas. These households are going to be located in the downtown, and a conservative level of household spending is probably going to bring over $500,000 into the downtown every single year. And of course, it's probably going to be more than that. I chose a fairly conservative figure if you think about how much all of these categories that I listed subsequently take out of an average budget. And an interesting item to note is also that households in multifamily homes tend to purchase within the immediate area to a much larger extent and support small businesses far more than single family homes. An estimated 70% of the dollars that are spent by these folks will stay here in our city. So another item that I'd like to address is that a lot of people say, I want businesses downtown. I don't want to see more residents. But the fact of the matter is that businesses won't locate in our downtown as it is. The demographic profile for our downtown census tract, which is indicated here at 6314, it's not the demographics that would attract a Starbucks or a Nike or anybody like that. The current median household income within our downtown is $44,000. That's significantly below the state median income. The population below the federal poverty level, it's almost 1 in 5 people that live in our downtown are under the federal poverty level. And if you look at how many people actually live in our downtown, that figure's only a little bit over 2,500 people. It's really a lot fewer than a city of our size you'd expect to see within this economic core of our city. What we're trying to build here is really an 18-hour economy. We have a good number of people who work in our downtown, either through city services or through nonprofit organizations, the professional service providers that are in some of our office buildings in the downtown. And, there are some larger employers that are just outside this footprint, like for example, Sasato or Community VNA, which is within it, actually. So once those people go home, there's nobody left in our downtown that is kind of a captive audience. An 18-hour economy means you have people who work within the area, you have people who live within the area. Because when you go home, you're going to go to the quickest, easiest, fastest grocery store or restaurant or whatever you may be looking for. So what this project is really designed to do, it's going to increase the downtown population. It's going to increase the median household income within this census tract. And together with other planned development projects that I'm going to go over shortly, it's going to be a significant increase above this current population. And there's going to be enough new activity that this demographic profile will change, and it will start to attract more of the types of establishments that Attleboro residents tell me that they want to see. So I'm going to go really, really quickly, lightning speed, through the development context. As of this moment, there are 4 other announced projects that will be locating within our downtown. One of them, of course, is already under construction. That's 1 Wall Street, the Renaissance South development. That's a new build, market rate housing, mixed use development. 29 South Main Street, that one's also a new build. This is the former Briggs Hotel building, and that one is going to be market rate housing as well. 37 Union Street, that's going to be mixed income housing. So it's going to be a variety of income tracts with some market rate, some deeply affordable, and everything in between pretty much. That's going to be an adaptive reuse project similar to the one that you're looking at tonight. And finally, 135 County Street, we have a prospect there, and that's going to be primarily new builds with of course, deference to the council. You all will be seeing this one soon, and they're proposing mixed income housing. So I'm going to go through just some of the numbers here. 29 South Main Street has a very similar number of units and a very similar price tag to this building. Even though it's a new build, there are expenses that you come across when it comes to demolition, and there are also several structural issues in the event that the home office becomes a new thing. The developers are making a contingency for that as well. So they really have to shore up the strength of the underdeck for parking. So 29 South Main Street, that's a market rate project as well, and it's coming in at roughly the same amount. It's a little over 10 million is the estimate right now. Union Street District, that one's estimated because, again, this is a more expensive project. It's an adaptive reuse rather than a new build. It's estimated at about, I want to say 25. Hold on one second while I'm going to, whoops. I actually have the numbers written in my notes section here. So let's see. Yeah, 25 million for 59 units of mixed income housing. So that's a significant increase over the budget for this project that we're looking at tonight, because it provides more units and because the building is a little bit more problematic to construct. 1 North Main, which is underway. I'm using the building license, the building permit number here, and it's about approximately $90 million project. It's going to be more than that once all is said and done for a new build of 136 units. There's a huge economy of scale. When you're building new, it costs very slightly more, if anything more, to build a larger building than what it does to build a smaller building. So they're getting almost 3 times the units as the 29 South Main project for, only not even twice as much. So these projects are all expensive, but I think that it's very important to understand that a project like 54 Union Street, which is a little over 10 million, again, 43 units of market rate housing, there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done just to structurally make sure that the building is sound, to remediate the contamination of its former use, and to connect the 2 buildings in the way that they've proposed to create one unified structure. That's going to be a lot of work. This is a labor of love. This really, if you look at the background of this deal, it is not something that the developers are undertaking to get filthy rich as a casino mogul or something like that. This is a labor of love. This is people who enjoy breathing new life into old buildings. So the requested and negotiated tax increment exemption, we considered a lot of factors with this. We considered developer need. We considered the construction amortization for the financing that they're going to have to take in. And we also wanted to account for the changes in the land use designation, because that obviously lowers the rate of taxation between commercial and residential uses. So the final negotiated structure, it's going to be an 85% tax increment exemption on the new value of the property. So we're still going to be getting the baseline, and we're also going to be getting 15% of the new value of the structure. Years 6 to 10, that steps up. So they're paying 25%. So it's a little bit more. Years 11 through 20, it's 65%. So again, they're paying more and more taxes as the time goes on. They have a 20-year amortization on their financing. So we thought that sticking to the large drop off at the end was appropriate in the case of this project. They do not intend to flip the building to a new property manager as soon as it's constructed. This is a long haul project within Attleboro. They're investing, and they're sticking around for the long term. That's what I have for my end. Would you like to take questions from me first, or would you like Jonathan to present on his part of this?
Let's take questions to you, Catherine, first. To city councilors, committee members, and councilors, do you have any questions for Catherine on this project?
Yes, I have one.
Councilor Waterman, you have the floor.
Thank you. Catherine, could you talk a little bit about the parking?
Sure. The parking within this, there is a joint agreement, and I mean, Jonathan can tell you more about the details, but Gary Arasian has been working with them. It's gone through the zoning board of appeals, as I understand it, Jonathan. You can correct me if I'm incorrect there, but I believe it has been already.
Yes, that's correct. It has gone through, and we received a special permit for the building.
Would you like to tell Councilor Waterman about roughly where the parking is? I know the component that will be ultimately along Pine Street, but I can't speak to the entire parking scheme.
Sure. Yes, we have, I believe it's 3 parking spots on site there in the back. We had discussions with Gary Arasian in the past about essentially converting part of the parking lot directly behind our building into, actually, I guess it's owned by the city currently, but into spots that our tenants could use, or that we could lease spaces on an annual or a long-term basis. So that's our current plan of attack. And a lot of the tenants, we are not expecting to own vehicles, or they'll own only one vehicle, as is a very common trend in these areas, in these gateway cities. The train station being directly across the street, most residents will be able to get to and from work without needing a vehicle. Vehicular use on weekends or other special occasions, they could Uber or use other means of transportation.
Thank you.
Also, Councilor Waterman.
I don't have any other questions at the moment. Thank you.
Councilor Dolan.
So if there's 43 units, how many parking spaces will you have for 43 units?
For the 43, I believe it was, I'd have to look at my notes again. It's been a while since since we discussed this, but I believe it was close to that number, 43.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councilor Delissio, and then Councilor Cooper.
Thank you. Catherine, Happy New Year. And actually, I don't have a question. I just want to say that I'm always in favor of these sort of initiatives. I think when you're looking at any sort of a tax-related incentive that will get people down to the downtown, and I think that we have such almost a blank canvas with what we can do with some of the buildings. And you look at some of the other cities across the Commonwealth. I know Fall River has done very similar projects to this. Lowell, Lawrence, some of these other cities that have these old, beautiful buildings, who are able to repurpose them, because you're not always able to repurpose them. So I just think that the fact that you have someone like Mr. Cousins here, and who is committed to Attleboro for, what's the length of the TIE again? Was it 20 years?
Yes.
I think that's the type of project that we need, and that's something that should fill people with confidence when you have this type of project coming in. So kudos, and I'd like to see more of this down the line.
Thank you, Councilor Delisle. Councilor Cooper, you have the floor. You're muted.
Sorry about that. So I just wanted to clarify Councilor Waterman's parking question, because I thought the on-site parking was limited. I didn't think you had 43 on-site spots.
No, we don't. We have 3 on-site parking spots. And again, we're working with Gary on obtaining some parking spaces behind our building there in the actually City of Attleboro owned parking lot, which we would lease from the city at a yet to be determined rate, but whatever market rate, I'm assuming whatever market rate will be for the remainder of those spots, as there's quite a few spots in the back there that are not being utilized.
Thank you.
They have, I believe that it's a 0.25 mile radius that they're allowed to lease spaces within. So there are plenty of options to work with them as a city to enable this project to happen. We do this frequently, in my understanding, when there are development projects within our downtown where people will lease spaces within city lots on a monthly basis if they're residents.
All set, Councilor Cooper.
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Cobus.
Thank you. And I just have a quick question, and I very much agree with Councilor Delisle in thinking that this is a great project and generally supporting these initiatives. And so it's great to hear about this. My quick question is just regarding what is the program itself, and what happens if the property is sold. Do we come back and create a new TIE, or how's that work? Does it transfer over with the sale of the building?
It does. Yeah, the exemption agreement does transfer. So, it would have to go through the Economic Development Incentive Board. I'm not sure if there's a council ratification process on the back end of that, but it would at least go through the Economic Development Incentive Board as an item where the exemption is transferred if necessary. So that can be done at our discretion, but it is within the legislation that we're able to do so.
Perfect. It was just a quick question. So this sounds amazing. Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions for Catherine or Jonathan? Seeing none. So thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Jonathan, for attending the committee meeting. You did a wonderful job explaining it, and we have no further questions. So the motion is in order for the resolution. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. And that completes the business that the Capital Improvements and City Development Committee has to bring before the committee this evening. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Calling for a second. Thank you. I declare the Capital Improvements City Development Committee adjourned at 7:28. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I was going to go next, but I don't see my guests here. So, Jim, is Gary here yet? It's still a little early.
I don't see either of your guests.
Okay. Someone else can go and come back to me.
Budget and appropriations is canceled tonight, but I will call for a meeting next week at 6:45.
Traffic and transportation is also canceled, but just for FYI, there's a traffic study commission meeting on Thursday, January 28th at 6 p.m.
I'd like to call the Public Works Committee to order this evening, and it is, 7:29. I only have 2 items of business this evening. From the docket of April 7th, 2020, I entertain a motion to rescind the vote of 3/3/20 request for a new F-150 for the Water Department.
Second.
Thank you. Both of these motions, we've already actually taken care of these trucks. We've voted them in. They're already on order. This is just cleaning up my committee. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Secondly, from the docket of April 7th, 2020, I entertain a motion to declare surplus and available for disposition the following water department vehicles. 2003 Ford F-350 utility truck. The VIN number is 1FDWX37F93EB14888 with 172,000 miles in very poor condition. The second is a 2007 Ford F-150 pickup. The VIN number is 1FTRF147NA04624 with 246,000 miles, again, in very poor condition.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Lost your video. Okay,
Excuse me, Mr. Blair?
you lost your voice. We
I
didn't
did. Can you hear me?
I
hear
can.
you now.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask for an adjournment at 7:30.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The Public Works Committee is adjourned at 7:30 PM. Thank you.
Call Public Safety Emergency Management to order at 7:29. Have two motions this evening. From the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to transfer $9,945.87, excuse me, from account 12201-000-5582040, excuse me, Fire Department firefighting supplies to account 12201-000-585020 Fire Department fire safety equipment to pay for fire equipment related to a capital project.
Second.
Second.
In a nutshell, this money is required to outfit a new fire truck. It's for equipment for a new fire truck that has been approved with capital expenditure. And in order to spend this money, it has to be transferred from firefighting supplies to firefighting equipment so it can be used as a capital expense. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. From the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to transfer $25,000 from account 11241-000-578300 Citywide Reserve Fund, Citywide Reserve Capital to account 11241-000-599300 Citywide transfer to capital funds, and to further transfer $25,000 from account 11241-000-599300 Citywide transfer to capital project fund to account 3558-499-000 Fire Department roofs, other financing sources for costs associated with the roofs at Briggs Corner and Union Street Fire Station.
Second.
In a nutshell, this is money that they need for engineering and outside, how do they say it? I got it right here. Outside people to come in and assess the project and look at it and make sure when it does go out for bids, we're not going to get into the same situation we had at the library. We want to get it all down so they get a proper bid in it when it goes to the City Building Commission on that. I think it makes sense. Not everybody is astute to building practices, products, construction. It's necessary to go outside and get an outside contractor to look this job over. Yes, Jay.
Thanks, Chairman Blair. So the reality is this is a project that is needed, and it's something that I know we've heard about for quite some time now. So I'm glad to see it coming down and starting to get the traction. So thanks for bringing this out, Peter.
In the correspondence said that last rainstorm we got, they actually had some equipment damage from the rain coming in on Union Street. So definitely needed. Let's do it right the first time. Any other questions or comments?
Just one quick one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm supportive of the project, and I was just wondering if you could clarify why the move to the two different accounts. Why through the citywide transfer to capital fund?
Why they moved it? It's
Right.
just
And supportive of the project. I was just curious about that.
well, there's certain things you can't spend out of certain accounts.
That's right.
Right.
So we're just transferring it from one account to the other so that it can be properly spent where it's a capital project.
Right. Yep.
Correct, Mark?
You are correct. Has to be done. You have to spend it out of a certain account. That's why it goes from one to the next, from the next to the other.
I got something right tonight.
Thank you.
Let Bev know you're doing all right.
Not bad, huh? Any
Day's
other?
looking up, Peter.
Huh?
Your day's getting better.
Yeah, my day's getting better. It wasn't good earlier. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. That's all I have for capital approval. Yeah.
Second.
Public safety and emergency management. Sorry. I'd like to adjourn at 7:34.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen and
I'd like-
ladies.
I would call the personnel veteran.
If I could jump in, Ty, if you don't mind, to call
Absolutely.
land. Thank
Your
you.
go.
I'd like to call zoning and land use to order at 7:36. We have a couple order of business tonight and have two guests here. So from the docket of January 5th, 2021, I entertain a motion to approve the following: to lay out a portion of Nicholas Drive, length of 773.11 feet, from station 0 to station 7 plus 73.11 as a public way, and to accept said way in any related drainage, water, or sewer facilities or easements, all as shown on a plan and profile entitled Acceptance Plan Nicholas Drive, Attleboro, Mass, dated May 31st, 2019, prepared by Charles T. Camp, RLS, and John C. Spink, PE, which plan and profile have been deemed satisfactory to the Superintendent of Public Works.
Second.
Outstanding. Motion's in order. And so we had the public hearing for this last week. There were a few questions regarding drainage. So I've invited City Planner Gary Arasian and DPW Superintendent Mike Tyler to join us and talk a little bit about this. I sent a number of questions to Gary earlier today. And so Gary, if you will, can you talk a little bit about the process for the planning board to accept this and what went into that?
Sure. So first of all, Happy New Year to the City Council. And I'm looking forward to the day where we could reappear before you live in person. Hopefully that's soon in 2021. Thank you very much for inviting me. As Councilor Kobus mentioned, he emailed me a few questions. I actually contacted him this morning after I was invited to the committee meeting last week. I was a little unsure what the expectation was, so I wanted to make sure that I could prepare as much as I could. So I reached out to him and asked what he wanted me to touch on, and we had a good 10-minute discussion. He followed that up with a list of questions. So what you just asked off the email, Councilor Kobus, is what is the acceptance process for accepting streets for the planning board? Actually, the process for accepting streets in the city is the process is with the municipal council, not with the planning board.
Right.
So how does it get to the planning board? So let's start with some basic fundamental optics. A definitive subdivision plan, and let me also ask you if I use any terms or acronyms, please ask me what they are so I could clarify as we move along. So let's say that a developer or an applicant files a definitive subdivision plan with the planning board. It goes through a very exhaustive review process. The stormwater management system goes to a peer reviewer on behalf of the city, is under a contract with the city of Attleboro. The consultant acts as the planning board's agent to review this. We have work sessions with our consultant and the applicant's consultant. The city staff, myself and the senior land use planner, do the reviews of the subdivision to ensure compliance with the city's subdivision rules and regulations. We hold a public hearing, we go through the review process, and typically, depending on the complexity of the subdivision, an amount of time passes by. It could be 4 months, it could be 6 months, it could be 8 months, it could be whatever it takes. We ultimately render a decision. Most of those decisions are in the affirmative. Sometimes there are instances where the planning board has, for reasons of not complying with regulations, poor design, whatever the case may be. There are instances when the planning board has denied a subdivision, but clearly, by and large, the majority of the definitive subdivision plans that come before the planning board are approved. So once the plan is approved, the developer or the applicant records that at the registry of deeds, and there are certain upfront conditions in the certificate of vote that the developer has to abide by. One of them is they need to post a performance guarantee with the city of Attleboro that ensures that that subdivision is going to be developed or built in accordance with the approved definitive subdivision plan. And under Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Subdivision Control Law, there are 4 options that a developer has to secure. Could be cash, could be a lender's agreement, could be a performance bond, or it could be a covenant. It's up to them to decide how they want to move forward. And let's say they have secured that, and now we start to move forward. The developer begins construction. Over the course of time, over the course of typically 2 years, construction goes on. Installation of water mains, sewer lines, the drainage system, the road construction, sidewalks, curbing, catch basins, manholes, trees, you name it, everything in the subdivision regulations, those get installed. Along the way, as infrastructure is installed, the developer will from time to time come to the planning board and ask what is called a release of funds. So let's say at the beginning of the process, the value of a subdivision, the construction or the public improvements, let's say has, and I'm just going to put this number out there, let's say it's $1 million. Where do we get that value from? After a plan is approved, the Public Works Department establishes an amount that subdivision will cost. He or she will forward that to the planning board. The planning board takes a vote to accept that amount. Once we accept that amount, we pass that on to the developer. The developer then comes back and, like I said, selects one of those 4 types of securities that's allowed by Chapter 41, and there's only one of those 4. They can't be more than 2 or 3 or 4. It's just one is sufficient. The developer then begins to develop. And let's say that the selected security is a performance bond. So as I said, once construction starts, from time to time, the developer will come back to the planning board and say, I've completed X amount of work, maybe 20% of the water or 100% of the water, a certain percentage of sewer, a certain percentage of the stormwater management system, whatever the case might be. The planning board entertains that, says, okay, you want a release of funds. We then pass that on to the Public Works Department. The critical role of the Public Works Department in this case is they are the planning board's inspectors. They will review the work that the developer has said that he or she has completed. The Public Works Department will go out there and do their due diligence, whatever time it takes. Usually it's within a couple of weeks. They'll go out, do their inspection. Then they come back and report to the planning board. And that report could take a lot of different avenues. The first could be, yep, all the work that the developer said that he or she completed, it's all been completed. It cuts mustard. There's no issues with it. It's all satisfactory. The Public Works Department therefore recommends a bond reduction of, and I'll just throw this out there, $114,624.23. The planning board contemplates that, puts it up for a vote. As long as the majority of the planning board votes that money is released through a series of correspondence that my staff then handles next couple of days. So the bond goes down from, say, $1 million less what we just released. Or the Public Works Department can come back and say, you know what? We've done an inspection and we find a number of things faulty with the work, and we recommend no release at this time. Or the Public Works can come back and say, well, we've inspected the work. Some of it's satisfactory, some of it's unsatisfactory. So we recommend a smaller portion instead of the full amount of, say, I said earlier, 114,000. They may make a recommendation of only releasing 54,000 so-and-so. And the balance of the funds don't get released, they get held back. Now it's up to the developer to fix whatever wasn't initially built correctly and all the remaining work. So this goes on, it just goes on. As work is completed, the developer asks for bond reductions, so forth and so on. It's all corresponded to the Public Works Department. They do the inspections, and this just goes on. And then there's another subdivision going on. So these are multiple projects going on at the same time, and it takes a lot of coordination. And I think we do a very good job with that. So ultimately, when a project is completed, and when I mention a project, please understand that I'm only talking about the public improvements that are approved in the definitive plan. I'm not talking about housing construction, because a developer's building business model on say a 20-lot subdivision might be 5 or 6 years. So the planning board's approval tends to be about 2 years. So as I say to you that when a project is completed, I'm not talking about a build out of the homes. I'm talking about the public improvements that a developer is obligated to construct as a result of subdivision approval. So at one point, the developer will come back and say, okay, I've completed all the work. I'm sure everything is done satisfactory. Will you please issue a final release of funds? That means, please, all the money that is owed to me at this point, including interest, because the bond or the cash that goes into an interest-bearing account accrues interest. So once again, we go through the process again with the Public Works Department. We'll say we'll get a written request. All of this is in writing. We get a written request. We hand it off to the Public Works Department. They'll do an inspection, and let's keep everything in the affirmative. The Public Works Department will come back and say, all the work has been completed. It's all satisfactory. It's all inspected. It's all satisfactory, as I said. We therefore respectfully recommend a final release of funds in the amount of XYZ. So as part of that final release, there's some paperwork that also needs to be completed. Those are what we call the closeout documents. More specifically, any types of drainage easements that need to be conveyed to the city of Attleboro, as-built plans, and also street acceptance plans. The requirement of street acceptance plans are built into planning board certificates of vote. So as part of a final release, while the Public Works Director is examining all the hard asset work out in the field that's been completed and whether or not it's done satisfactorily, my office checks to make sure all the paperwork, all the closeout documents are in place. We being the planning staff, would report back to the planning board and say all the closeout documents have been submitted, they're satisfactory. We then get the recommendation from the Public Works Director. All the work has been completed, it's been inspected, it's satisfactory, and therefore we recommend to the planning board a release of all funds. The planning board then considers the input from the staff, considers the input, or the letter, I should say, the recommendation from the Public Works Department, and the planning board would then vote. As long as there's a majority vote in favor, which there almost always are a majority vote, the funds are released, the project is complete. So the role of the planning department, the role of the planning board ends right there. They manage the project, they administer it, they oversee it, they oversee all the funds, they oversee the construction through the eyes of the Public Works Director. And once there's a final release of funds, the only piece that's missing at that point that we complete is the street acceptance process. That street acceptance process then is up to the staff, and within a few months of the approval, as things queue up, we then come before the municipal council through the mayor's communication, as we are right now with this pending matter, as we've been doing for the last 25 years at least, is we then petition the municipal council through the mayor's communication, respectfully asking that the city council hold a public hearing to accept the ways. Once the ways are accepted, the plans or the Mylars are signed by the council, as you know. We have a file on every single one. Documents are recorded. And once the streets within that subdivision are accepted, there are two critical benefits there. The first is, now that they become public right-of-ways, those streets are now to receive all the public benefits from the city. For example, snow plowing being the major one. Snow plowing, maintenance of any facilities over time, bus pickup, so forth and so on. The other benefit, as you know, is as we accept all of these streets, we have a cumulative effect at the end of the year that when we then record these with Mass DOT in Boston, our Chapter 90 funds also go up accordingly. So there's another benefit. So as those funds come in, what does the mayor do? Through Public Works and the council, we reinvest that money back into the public ways that we just accepted. So that's the process. The planning board administers subdivision control law, administers the bond, does all the releases in concert with the Public Works director. At the very end of a project, typically from 2 to 2.5 years. Other times, projects have been extended, mutually agreeable with the developer and the planning board. But nonetheless, at some point when they are complete and the funds have been released, that clearly implies that all the work has been completed. It's all been inspected. It's all been completed to the satisfaction of the Public Works director, the planning board, and they can release those funds. Once the funds again are released, then the baton is handed to staff to then come before the municipal council to accept ways. Now, please bear in mind, that's what we do in Attleboro with respect to acceptance. There are a lot of communities out in the Commonwealth that just won't accept ways. In fact, after speaking on this matter a few times with the city solicitor over the course of several years, because questions come up, processes are modified, I've come to learn that there are some planning boards in the Commonwealth that actually put into their certificates of vote that the ways will not be accepted. Well, it is what it is. It's self-autonomous. Every community can do what it wants within the law. But in the city of Attleboro, since I can remember, we've always made it a point that at the end of the project, when it's all completed and the planning board relinquishes its authority, there's nothing else for it to do, then for that short period of time, the baton is handed to the planning department, then to process the streets through the mayor's office and the city council for street acceptance.
Perfect.
That's about it in a nutshell. That's about as, I hope it's not an oversimplification, but that's the process in a nutshell, folks.
No,
It isn't anything too
that's great.
complicated.
No, and just to give people a rough outline of how I hope this will go. We're looking to review the process briefly, and I think that was a great description. The next step is to talk about this specific street, Nicholas Drive. And then if time permits afterwards, I'd like to briefly discuss the potential of if there's something we can or should do as far as holding on to money until the street's been accepted or not, and to just briefly discuss that. Not that it's before the council, but
Yeah, we shouldn't. I was with you.
Right until the end, President Cooper.
Thank you. So I was with you until the end, right? That Matt, any changes are not before us. If you wanted to introduce something to suggest that, and then bring that before the council, Gary, Mike, and others, the administration could come talk about the options there. But I don't think we should get into that tonight. We'll get into a lot of if a biff is what a but is.
And the question was mainly if the council had the ability to change it, to Gary's knowledge, if other communities were doing that. But regardless, we'll stick to just this specific street for now. So before we move on to this particular instance, does anybody have questions for Gary or Mike Tyler regarding the process itself? I saw Councilor Dolan first.
Thank you. Gary, what I caught what you were saying. You were saying other cities don't accept roads. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So is the purpose of that so they don't have to take responsibility for them?
Mainly, I would think so, sure. But yeah, there's there are a lot of communities in the Commonwealth that their roads, their subdivision roads remain private.
And so they stay with the developer and it's up to him or her
No,
to maintain?
not necessarily the developer, not necessarily the developer. It's a private way. So as you know, in many instances, what we've done in the city back in the day, remember we used to have what was called an abandonment plan, where people wanted to abandon ways that were paper streets. Okay, paper streets are private ways. The city of Attleboro doesn't own that; it's private. So whether a way, at some point, somebody owns land, right? A right of way isn't a street. A right of way is two lines drawn on property that allow people to cross over, but it's actually real estate. So when a subdivision is approved and the developer sells the properties, typically what he or she also does is sells an interest in the middle of that roadway along the length of along the length of your lot, midway to the middle of that right of way, and everyone has an ownership to that. So the developer could either retain the ownership of the right of way just where the roads are and just sell the land, or typically what they would do is not only sell you the lot, let's say it's a 20 lot subdivision, they sell the 20 lots and every one of those lots has frontage along the road inside that subdivision. What the developer typically does is not only sell the lot 15, but now the purchaser of lot 15, let's say, has frontage of 100 feet and the width of the road is 40 feet wide. Along with that, you get a piece of real estate by easement that's 100 feet long and 20 feet deep. And that's how we've come up, as you know, how many times this question has come up, that, do I own? And we say, yeah, you own to the middle of the road, right? We've all heard that term before. Yeah, the person owns to the middle of the road. So in a private subdivision, or should I say in a subdivision, Councilor Dolan, where the roads or streets or rights of ways are not accepted, typically the people or the residents who buy the lots inside that subdivision also buy an easement to the middle of the road. So somebody has to own that. Somebody has to own that. So it's not no man's land. The developer can own it. But they typically won't. They'll sell an interest with the lot that they sell, the full length of their frontage to a depth of 40 feet, or depending on the depth of the right of way.
Thanks, Gary.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Councilor DeSimone?
Thank you, Councilor Copus. Gary, thanks for the overview. As someone relatively new to this, that was very informative. But my question is this, based upon what you said and what I see in the ordinances as they currently stand, is our review simply that of a rubber stamp? What is our jurisdiction and discretion in this question then, if the planning board has made all the decisions and released the funds? What do you see as our role?
So when you say ordinances, what are you referring to?
Well,
this isn't in the ordinances. This is in the.
They refer to, when they sent it down, they refer to 16-2.2.
Oh, I see. Okay, I didn't know what your reference is.
Yeah.
I didn't know what your reference is. So the decision is whether or not the council wants to have that right of way accepted as a public way. So when you say rubber stamp, what the planning board isn't asking you is, are you complicit with the design? Do you agree that the subdivision's built in, because you would never know that. And that's why, as being a legislative body, that's not your role. Your role isn't then to, with all due respect, because this is on the general law, chapter 41 subdivision control law, across the Commonwealth, this is the responsibility of any community that has a planning board. Is we've taken this subdivision, approved lines with construction standards, with our staff in the Public Works Department. We have concluded that this subdivision complies in every way satisfactorily with our subdivision control law. That's all the planning board is saying. We released it, the developer's off in his way. Now, a next step is whether or not that community, in this case Attleboro, now wants to accept the way. So you're not necessarily rubber stamping the planning board's approval. By default, it's accepted that the planning board has done all its due diligence, relied on the professional staff, and it could be consultant staff. But fortunately, we have the capacity of the city of Attleboro that all that is done by the staff. And the planning board says it's up to you now procedurally whether or not the municipal council now chooses to accept the way. So your role is really deciding whether or not you want to accept more roads as public ways. That's all it is. So it's not ordaining or reasserting or reaffirming the planning board's action. You have a complete independent action separate from the planning board.
All right, thank you. And I meant no disrespect to the
No,
planning
no,
board.
no, I didn't take it that way.
Okay.
I
And
didn't take it that way.
if I may, Councilor Cobus, one
Please.
quick follow-up.
Yes.
In your experience, Gary, you've been doing this, and to my fellow councilors, have you seen roads not accepted? And if so, for what kind of reasons?
I will tell you, I've probably been doing this for a very, very long time, probably well over 30 years. And every time I've sent, I should say I or my staff, we've sent down to the municipal council, my God, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds. And we've probably accepted miles of roadway in increments of 400 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,900 feet. They accumulate over time. I've yet to see a time when the municipal council has not unanimously voted to accept the way. Unless you can remember one, I honestly don't recall any.
President
Gary.
Gilbert, do you?
Yeah, just to follow up to that, Gary, I think I don't remember the council ever rejecting one because I think that remediation work, right, or the delay happens at the board level. So if something were discovered, the planning board doesn't send roads that are 80% complete or there's an issue. There's some subdivisions that have the developer themselves have not come forward for the city to accept it because they haven't put in their fire alarm boxes. They have a drainage problem. The water's ripping down Reed Street into the 10-mile river. There's subdivisions that haven't come our way because there's some delay either on the developer's side or the city is saying, you didn't complete X, Y, or Z in the subdivision.
Yeah, Council President, that would never happen. That's why I did not infer that from Councilor DeSimone's question that we would at any time ever send to the municipal council a defective subdivision. Those are all teased out, 100% locked in, approved. So the way I was answering Councilor DeSimone's question was, would there be some reason why the council would not want to accept the way for some reason other than that there's a defect? That's the way I took that question because there would never be a time, and I will reassure you that, let alone myself, the planning board would really assure you that we would never approach the municipal council ever with a known defect before it because it passes so many checks and balances that it's inconceivable to think that we would send something down to the council that is in any way defective.
Excellent. Any further
That's
questions
exactly
on the
my
process?
point. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
I saw Councilor Blair and then Vice President Jackson. Councilor Blair?
Gary, didn't we at one time have a city engineer that checked these drainage problems and checked these water mains and sewer mains and whatnot?
So, Councilor Blair, to be quite fair, I don't think the city's ever had a city engineer. So we've always used the Public Works Department, their staff, the Water Department, and Wastewater Department. So when you say to check these problems, back in the day, if you recall, I'm going back way back in the day, if councils will recall, the Water Department and Wastewater Department were actually divisions of the Public Works Department. So we would back then communicate with the Public Works Director, and he would then examine those aspects of the subdivision that were highway related, if you may, road construction. He then would defer the sewer to the deputy, if you may, for looking at the design of the sewer or the construction, and then he would also look to the water superintendent at that time. So, but we've never had a city engineer on the payroll in the city of Attleboro, no PE, but all those inspections, Peter, whether it was just the public works director, the public works director and the wastewater superintendent, the public works director and the water superintendent, all three of them, we would always get a report. And when I say we, I should say the planning board they would report right back to the planning board. So those inspections, and I could go back a long time back to the 80s and some real good memories come back. Those would all go to internally, all inspected, and then voted on by the planning board.
But the plans for these subdivisions that you go over are quite in detail, I would assume. And
very much so. So I recall we now have for the last 20 years or so, 25 years or so, and I'm glad you asked that question. You're talking about design now. So back in the day, from about 86 to about 94 councils, I'm just going to walk you down history a little bit.
Well, it just in the for time's sake.
Okay. Another time.
Keep moving.
Okay.
And so,
sorry.
Vice President Jackson, then let's get to this particular street and talk about that.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councilor Kobus.
Great.
Hi, Gary. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Nice to see you both. So bottom line is, last week at our public hearing, we had a few people who spoke against the city accepting it, but at the same time, they want the city to accept it, but they were saying that they've been having continuous problems with the drainage. My question to you, just point blank, is there an issue over there now?
And okay, so Vice President Jackson, I think the next step was to talk about this particular street. And so my next question for Gary was to explain the process with regard to the street. So can we hold on that for 1 second? Vice
Certainly.
President? Okay, thank you. Gary, if you could just talk about the process and how things went with this particular street and any issues you might have run into, particularly with regard to drainage, and was that inspected and what was the result, and
Sure.
what was the planning board's decision?
So this is Stonefield Estates Phase 1. Oak Hill Meadow Way, Nicholson Drive, and a portion of Savina Drive. This subdivision went through the exact exhaustive, extensive review process as all subdivisions do. The stormwater system that we're talking about right now, I went out there on Friday. I went out there on today. I'm going to give you my observations. Is a complicated system. What the residents were talking about, and I thought the residents were talking about a number of things. It wasn't just necessarily stormwater, but it is what it is. There is what we call a sediment forebay right on Oak Hill Meadow Way. A sediment forebay is not a stormwater basin. So let me tell you what's out there, and then I'm going to tell you what each one of these are, and I will answer all your questions. So just bear with me for a second so I can just give you a very quick overview and an education. So we're all talking about the same thing. And Mike, if you disagree or if you want to add something, please feel free. So the first structure, if you may, these are all called structures, is a sediment forebay. The water from the subdivision all is channeled from pipes and swales. Some of it surface, which would be a swale, some of it underground, which would be piping, catch basins. This all fills up what's called a sediment forebay. The purpose of the sediment forebay is all the particles that fill up into the basin before these go into the stormwater basins. What the sediment forebay does, and hence the word sediment, when it first starts to rain, you've got dirt and stones and debris and whatnot all over the streets and the gardens. Well, when it starts to rain, the initial rain picks all this up and sends it into the system. So in order for the system not to clog the stormwater structures, all this water that picks up all these solids dispenses those in what's called a sediment forebay. The four being F-O-R-E, the first basin, the forebay. Sediment meaning the particles that it's picking up. And the DEP regulation requires in the first flush, what they call a half-inch first flush. In Attleboro, the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board require a 1-inch flush, which is a lot more restrictive. So these, when the storm comes and it fills up this forebay, the purpose of the forebay is for water to accumulate, rise, and all the solids, the suspended solids, they're in the water, right? They're all floating around. And they're supposed to fill up in this forebay, and eventually they settle down to the ground. And then the water tops over and goes into the stormwater basin. So as the water fills up, there's what we call high turbidity. Turbidity meaning the relative clarity of water. It's very high. It's very low. You really can't see through it. Why can't you see through the water? Because it's picking up all the debris. It's dumping it into the forebay. And over time, when that fills up, because they call them suspended solids, they're heavy, they start to drop down. Because it weighs more than the water. So those drop down to the bottom, and the water clarifies, so the turbidity goes down. And then that storm water goes where? It then can go into the next basin right behind it. So the next one, so the first one is the forebay. That's the topic of discussion. So if you want, I could stop there, but I could tell you how the rest of the system works. If you want, maybe for purposes of simplicity, I could stop there because I think that's the point of contention.
I think for now we can
correct?
Stop at the forebay. But I just had a question. You said you went out there today. Was there water in it today?
No, sir. No. So I went Friday at 12:45. I'm going to say there was about 2 to 3 inches of water. Some places you could actually see dry land because the bottom is not completely flat. I saw land, but I would say there was about 2 to 3 inches of water on Friday. That was around 11:45, and I went there this afternoon right after work. I think I drove by around 5 o'clock at night, and it was bone dry.
Okay.
There's no water in it.
And some of the residents were talking about there being a requirement for 72 hours for that to drain. I don't know if that's for the forebay or what. Is that requirement accurate?
Sure. So
and I understand there's a lot of variables, but
yeah. So I'm not going to tease out to say, well, there are different standards for sediment forebays and stormwater basins. Just to make it simple, let's apply that standard to everything, okay? Because technically speaking, it doesn't, but let's do that. Let's hold that to that standard out of fairness to everybody. So if you look at our subdivision regulations, and I know there's a sentiment out there that said, well, it was promised it had to be 72 hours. Please let's understand that there are a lot of variables that go into an infiltration system. So this is an infiltration system. What that means is the water infiltrates into the ground, all right? It's not a detention basin where it holds water for a period of time and then it seeps out through a pipe, okay? This is infiltration. This is groundwater where the water gets absorbed into the ground. The rule of thumb, industry standard, is that it should get done, and I'm using the word intentionally. I'm using the word very intentionally, should be done within 72 hours. So I looked at the documentation that was submitted to the council last week, and I didn't highlight this. I wish you could see this, but this was highlighted to the council. I didn't highlight this. And in it, I'm just going to read the first 3 words. It says EPA recommends that, okay? It doesn't say EPA compels, EPA shall require, EPA requires. It's not finite. It's not definitive. It says recommends. And it goes on to say that within 3 days, then it says in 72 hours to reduce for the dewatering to occur. That they sent, I didn't send that to you. That was sent here. It says EPA recommends. Our regulations, our subdivision regulations, those that were adopted in 2008, when the municipal council adopted for the first time the stormwater ordinance, April of 2008. That was required by NIPD's Part 1, if you recall. This is a federal requirement. When we adopted the ordinance in 2008, April of 2008, I'm going to tell you at that time, what we adopted was cutting edge. And because now we're on the NIPD's 2, we're going to be coming back to the planning department through the mayor's office. We'll be coming back to the city council to make some amendments to the ordinance that we adopted in 2008, but I'm going to reassure you that the amendments that we're going to present to the council to the ordinance are really minimal. And that should be a good thing because we adopted such a cutting edge ordinance in 08 that almost all of that still applies to this day. And I'm very proud of that. So where am I going with this? In 2008, when we adopted the local stormwater ordinance pursuant to NIPD's Part 1, the planning board, you then said in the ordinance, I think it's about 3 pages, it's very short, you set the standard in the ordinance and then said to the planning board and to the Conservation Commission, we, the municipal council, now authorizes the planning board and the Conservation Commission to adopt regulations that conform, that adhere to this ordinance. And we did. Those regulations now refer to the Massachusetts Stormwater Management Standards, MASWMS. If you go to the planning board's regulations right now, it says C, Massachusetts Stormwater Management Standards. When you go to that, and I just took this out today, and if you like, I can forward this to the municipal council. It talks about sediment forebays right at the top here. This is Structural BMPs, Best Management Practices, Volume 2, Chapter 2, page 15. And I'm just going to read this to you. It says, unless part of I'm going to put on my glasses, excuse me. Oh, here it is. So it talks about sediment forebays, and I'm just going to get to the part so I don't have to read the whole thing. I'm going to get to the part about the 72 hours. It goes on to say, for design purposes, use 72 hours to evaluate dewatering. It doesn't say thou shalt require, you shall use, you're compelled. So what it says is use 72. That's what we recommend. These are best management practices. So where I'm going with this is, was that number 72 out there? Absolutely was. There's no question about it. But please understand that we're talking about a lot of different variables that go into the stormwater system. And I think I need to emphasize the word system. This isn't just an independent forebay acting on its own. Water feeds into it from a system, and water from this forebay discharges into a system. So it's one cog in a much larger system. And I did see in the handout from the applicant or from the residents, it says as of 12/7/2020, the forebay has retained 2 feet of water since the beginning of November. So what did that do? That triggered a series of investigations on my part. So what did I do? I went to our water department and I asked, with this information at hand, I'm going to read it again, and you all have this. So this was emailed to you. It says, as of December 7th, 2020, the forebay has retained 2 feet of water. Well, why does it retain water? Is it not functioning? Or what are the other optics that go into this? Why doesn't it infiltrate? Well, I discovered something. I discovered that in the month of November 2020, we had 9 days out of 30 days, we had rain. I discovered that 9 days out of the month of December, we had rain. So effectively for the month of November and the month of December, 1/3 of the month, we had rain. Those were just the days of precipitation. I then inquired, okay, what does that mean? It could rain every day and you could still have an inch of water, if you know what I mean. It's a very light drizzle all the time. So I discovered that during that period of time from November 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, we had almost a foot of rain, 11.85 inches. So what that tells me is we didn't have just one rain event filled up and it just stayed like that. So what it tells me is we had rain, then we had another rainstorm a couple of days later. And while this is going down, while the elevation is going down, it fills up with water again because it's raining again. As it goes down, it's raining again. So I implore you to understand that there are a lot of variables that go into why the basin or the forebay doesn't just empty out in 72 hours. First of all, it's an industry recommendation. And did the engineer at the night of the public hearing say, yeah, it'll probably empty out in 72 days? Absolutely, they did. But it's not a hard fast that if it doesn't in 72 hours, that it means it's defective. There's no defect in this. There's nothing, as I said to you earlier,
Perfect.
because this basin is not going down, the pipes feeding into it, there's no water backing up there, and there's no defect moving forward with it, like from the forebay to the back. So we've had 18 days of rain in the course of 2 months with a foot of water. And also, let me add this to the equation. The ground is frozen. It's very difficult for water to infiltrate when the ground is frozen. So if you put all these optics together, there is a rational empirical argument why we've had why in these pictures they show that the water's topped off at the top. It certainly has. I've seen those. But as of today, there's no water there. Why? Because it works.
No, and Gary, that's a perfectly logical explanation. I appreciate you helping out with that research. I did have just a couple other quick questions. First of all, with this particular property, do you remember what the planning board vote was when it was time to close it out?
So you mean a final release of funds?
Yes.
Yeah, it was either 8-1 or 7-1, and I was going to look that up today, and I completely forgot, and I apologize. I will research that first thing tomorrow morning. Oh, okay. So it's either 8-1 or 7-1 in favor of voting a final release of funds.
Okay, and if I could, just a quick question for Mike Tyler. When you guys inspected this, did you have any issues throughout the course or any concerns with this particular subdivision?
No, thank you, Councilor Gobis and members of the City Council. So fortunately or unfortunately on this one, I did the final inspection because we had a case of COVID run through my building and the unfortunate passing of Ron. It's only myself and former Superintendent Dubuque and Bobby, the general foreman, that performs these inspections for the Public Works Department. So just want to make sure that it's just those 3 individuals. It's not, we don't let everybody in the department. We have years of experience at this. It's not something we're trying to teach some people now, but we take it very seriously. I think Gary did a great job capturing most of it. I did the inspection on this. I mean, I think the City Council has to realize that when we look at these systems, there's a lot of different systems nowadays between retention, detention, bioretention, replicated wetlands. So they're all different. They are all meant to act different ways. We have to look at this system. I do it in reverse. I actually go to where the outlet is and see what I got for issues over there, whether or not it's excessive sediments backing up into the pipe. And I work it reverse all the way back through the system, stop popping a couple manhole covers, looking in catch basins, seeing if we have any record on date of the roadway flooding, somebody's backyard flooding. We had none of those issues in Stonefield 1. So in taking all those factors aside, when I went there and did the final inspection, I believe it was the last week of October, I did make a recommendation at that time, which they were completely empty at the end of October. I did make the recommendation to the developer at that time to at least go in there and cut all down the high vegetation on the first 2 forebays. I think the third one is some type of vegetation forebay, so I told them not to touch that one. I'm not sure exactly what's supposed to be growing in there or not. So, but I've never seen water in that third forebay either. I think that's a very important point too. I have seen water in the first and second forebay. And as Gary explained, we expect it to be in the first one. That's catching the sediment. I have seen it in the second one. I've never seen it in the third one. I've never seen it coming out the emergency overflow, which is in the back of that third forebay. So,
right, which is the fourth one.
The fourth, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah, that's right.
So again, I try to work it backwards. I try to go where the outlet is and work my way back and then go on a past history. Have we seen any flooding, heard any complaints about flooding? If I see anything on the pipes of a big sediment block up or something like that, it's telling me that the water's not being able to escape out of the outlet pipe into that first forebay. I didn't witness any of that. So of course, that's when we make the recommendation that it is working as intended. It has been a very rainy month. We have in the past, I will tell this council, we have in the past had concerns. Last year, we had one about a different subdivision We didn't know if it was actually working correctly or not. It was built more on open swales than pipes, which was Avalon Estates. And we made the recommendation at that time, which the planning board also approved, that we actually let that subdivision go through a 1-year cycle. So we could then listen to complaints, kind of observe more through all 4 seasons to make sure that was working properly. And then we did make the final recommendation to accept it. So it's something that we take very serious because it's a very difficult field when they're talking stormwater now because of all the different systems that they use. And I don't think anybody's an expert on any one of them. So we just have to do our due diligence through visual and complaints. So we do that. I say we do take it seriously. We have failed ones in the past, not failed them. So that's a right that the planning board does have, not to accept it just because the developer puts in for that acceptance. So I hope that answers most of the question.
Absolutely. That answers most of my questions. The one other thing, and President Cooper, I'll get right to you in just a second. The last question is about the street itself. Any issues there that you saw?
Nope. When we actually do, it's something that kind of I started when I got here. When they seek for a final bond reduction for a road, so each time they ask for a bond reduction, we'll do an inspection. And like Gary mentioned earlier, we write down what has been completed, not completed. I kind of really didn't like that system at first. So once we got the final acceptance, I would actually go out to the developments or Bobby or Ron at the time, and we would make a list of what concerns that we had, and we'd present them right to the developer then and say, hey, these are the things, just so you're not being surprised. This is what we're going to give to the planning board. These are the things that need to be worked on. It seemed, because there's some things that they can actually fix pretty easily, and some things that take time. So in this case particularly, there was nothing wrong with the roadway. There was nothing wrong with sidewalks or anything like that. I think the only thing that was missing in the final review was the fire alarm box that the planning board gave them a variance not to put in at the time because of the request of the residents. So there's nothing wrong with this. Actually, it's a pretty well-built subdivision. And hopefully the second phase goes out the same way.
Perfect. That answers all of my questions. I'll entertain questions from the council, and then we can vote this out. President Cooper.
Thank you. So the Coopers did a homeschool lesson today in this subdivision at 7:34 this morning. And the bay 1 was empty. Bay 2 was empty. I didn't walk across to see bay 3 or 4 because I didn't want somebody saying, who is this wacko walking across my yard at 7:30 in the morning. We drove the entire subdivision, talked about the history of Mary Roche's farm and what used to be there and what this looks like. It looks like it works to me. I have seen water in the past in Bay 3, but that was years ago in the infancy of this subdivision. And Mike, I'm thrilled to hear you say you start at the end and work your way back, because a great conservation agent by the name of Eddie Tanner taught me that a long time ago, Gary.
Don't remember that. Yep.
Start at the end and work your way back. That's how you know where the problems are. So I'm in full support of accepting it. I know that there have been both personal and initial sort of construction bumps, if you will, with this development and the phasing, but I didn't see any of that when I was out there this morning. So I'm in full support of, and my comments apply to all the roads we're accepting in this subdivision.
Perfect. Thank you, President Cooper. Councilor Delizio.
Thank you, Gary, Mike, thanks for coming out. Thank you for the tutorial. I think it's very educational. So if I just had to almost piggyback on what President Cooper is saying. So if I was to put a bow on this and package it up nicely, so 72 hours, that's a rule of thumb, not a rule of law. The project met all the qualifications as all the projects that we've seen in front of us for 25 to 30 years. We had rainy autumn months with frozen ground due to some colder weathers, which makes it a little more difficult for water to permeate the ground, which could lead to perceived backups, and it was backups and not flooding. And then finally accepting this, if I'm understanding, which this is my first rodeo. It's going to allow the residents to be able to partake in additional city services while making the city eligible for additional Chapter 90 funds, which is used for road improvements, notably sidewalks.
Well, road improvements in any roads that are accepted. So it's just a reinvestment in the accepted ways. Yes.
Thank you.
Sidewalks. Yeah, that includes sidewalks, Councilor Delicio. Mike, I should have deferred to you. I'm sorry, but Mike?
No, I think that all makes sense.
Yes, sidewalks too, Councilor Delicio.
Councilor Delicio, anything else?
That's it.
Councilor Dolan.
Thank you. So I've been out there as well, and they are dry now because I was out there on Friday and then Monday, I believe, but there hasn't been rain in a while. If you recall, Gary, I had been to some of the planning meetings, regarding this because this is my ward and I've had some complaints. And I feel like in one of those meetings, it was going to be scraped and flushed. Did that ever happen? I feel like I heard that was going to happen.
Yeah, and that's what Mike spoke about earlier is in these areas, if there was any need to scrape the bottom to make sure there wasn't any sediment that was creating like an impervious bottom. So I asked Mike to take a look at that. And that's what Mike said earlier is in the forebay, before he wrote his inspection report, he had all that material. He had said there was the growth and all that. Mike, if you want to just repeat it, he had that all cleared out. He just said that about, 5 minutes ago?
Okay, not sure where I was on that.
Yeah, he just said that before he recommended approval, his final inspection, he had the developer go into the first forebay, the one closest to Oak Hill Meadow Way, and clean it out. Mike, is that what you said? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes, that's exactly what I said.
Oh, thanks, Mike. And as far as my concern is, I mean, I'm in full support of accepting this road because not accepting it would only hurt the residents. But I definitely still have concerns about the forebay, and I also have concerns about that corner house on Ritchie Road because that gets definite flooding. I've been down there numerous times, and when I was getting complaints about the forebay, I brought my rubber knee-high boots, and I brought those boots to go onto that property. So, because when you turn off Ritchie Road, when you take a right on the Nicholas, the street's higher than that yard. So there's definitely flooding down there. I've definitely seen that. And again, I'll definitely be voting in favor of it. I just feel, I've gotten a lot of complaints, and I've never had this many issues with a builder and complaints from constituents like this.
So, Councilor Dolan, that matter of water on that lot, I've probably answered that question well over a dozen times. And let me reassure you again, what you're seeing on that property, and I think I answered an email probably 6 weeks ago on that again. So let me tell the council too, I've probably received well over 3 dozen emails, if not more. And in every single instance, you will see the continuity in my responses. I responded to all of them, mainly from one person, and they've been consistent throughout. And let me reassure you again, have I seen pooling on that corner lot? Absolutely, but that is not as a result of stormwater topping over that forebay and going down that mound, and it's not coming from the street either. What it is I think, is there's a depression, and that when it rains, water pools on that court, but that's not as a result of water topping off that forebay, going down the side and filling up that property.
I didn't think I wasn't trying to imply that it was coming from the forebay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you
No,
were. Okay.
I wasn't trying. No, I was not implying that. I mean, and I'm not an engineer. I didn't know if it was coming because the road seems to be higher than the property now. It seems a little built up. So that's what I was talking about. I wasn't talking about it coming over the top of the forebay. And again, for some reason I missed Mike saying that they scraped it and flushed it. I don't know how I missed that, but I did apparently. So thank you.
All right. Any other questions? President Cooper, I saw your hand up. You good?
I'm good.
All right. To my committee, any questions before we call for a vote?
None for me, Council Corbis.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Gary Rasia, Mike Tyler. Appreciate you
Pleasure.
guys joining us. Feel free to drop off. The next motion we have here is from the docket of January 5th, 2021. I entertain a motion to approve the following: to lay out a portion of Oak Hill Meadows Way, length of 381.41 feet from station 0 to station 3 plus 81.41 as a public way, and accept said way in any related drainage, water, or sewer facilities or easements, all as shown on a plan and profile entitled Acceptance Plan Oak Hill Meadows Way, Attleboro, Massachusetts, dated May 31st, 2019, prepared by Charles T. Camp, RLS, and John C. Spink, PE, which plan and profile have been deemed satisfactory to the Superintendent of Public Works.
Second.
Motion's in order. This is Oak Hill Meadows Way. It's connected to Nichols Drive and part of the same subdivision. Any questions or comments on this one? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. That concludes the business of the Zoning and Land Use Committee. Move to adjourn.
But before you do,
Sure.
just everybody needs to go in and sign the Mylars for Palm Street, please.
Right. Yep. All right. Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned at 8:36. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
again, Gary and Mike.
Good night, anytime. Yep, good night, folks.
I call the Personnel, Veterans and Human Services Committee together at 8:37. Write that in. And from the docket of January 19th, 2021, I would entertain a motion to accept the donation to the Veterans Office of $295 in Stop and Shop gift cards from the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution, the DAR, Attleboro chapter. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions about this? Okay, seeing none. Call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? I see none. So it passes 3-0. And also from the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to accept the donation to the Veterans Office regarding the donation of $250 in Market Basket gift cards from the Holiday Spirit Committee.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions about this motion? Okay. First of all, I want to thank all those people who are responsible for these two donations. I was going to just read before I call for a vote. Ben Quell wrote in his memorandum that this act of generosity, our veterans agent, is a terrific asset to the veterans of Attleboro. Our nation's heroes have already fought our enemies abroad and kept us safe from those who would threaten our way of life. They should never be left alone to fight hunger. And so, did I call for a vote? Excuse me. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? None. Vote passes 3-0. And finally, from the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to accept a donation of 250 marketing flyers to the Attleboro Council on Human Rights with a value of $120.65 from Taryn McCarthy of Moo Inc.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Peter. And do we have any questions or thoughts about this?
No.
Okay, I have not seen these flyers yet, but they should be spread around the city to inform people of our Council on Human Rights and what they're trying to do for our city. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the vote passes unanimously. And I would like to move to adjourn at 8:41.
Second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Vote passes unanimously, and that concludes the business of the Personnel, Veterans, and Human Services Committee this evening. Call for the next committee meeting at the next appropriate time.
I'd like to call the License Committee to order at 8:40. I have two motions this evening. From the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to approve the automatic amusement devices license application from Chuck E. Cheese's, number 464 at 287 Washington Street, with 64 skill kiddie ride video games.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions?
No.
Nobody has any questions?
I don't.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. From the docket of January 5th, 2021, I entertain a motion to approve the application for a Class 2 license for South Attleboro Auto Sales, Inc. at 411 Washington Street with 10 customer parking spaces and 30 display spaces.
Second.
Thank you. So this is the one I tried to bring out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard back from the owner. There were no cars there. I didn't know what was going on. So apparently he's just kind of in limbo, but he still wants to get the license and eventually he'll get some cars there.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions or anything?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And that's all the business I have tonight. I'd like to call for an adjournment at 8:41.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'd like to call to order the City Property and Claims Committee at 8:41. I have 7 motions this evening. The first one is from the docket of January 19th, 2021. I entertain a motion to approve a 36-month lease agreement for 5 copiers from Conica Minolta for the school department.
Second.
Thank you. I have no concerns or questions. Does anyone else? Pete?
No.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. From the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to declare the following water department vehicle as surplus and available for disposition. It's a 2004 Ford Ranger. The VIN number is 1FTYR10UX 4PA 19752. It has 145,000 miles and the condition is poor.
Second.
Thank you. Any concerns, questions?
No.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Aye also. From the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to declare the following police department vehicles as surplus and available for disposition. A 2013 Ford Explorer SUV. The VIN number is 1FM5K8 AR3DGC 63524. It has 104,911 miles and it's in poor condition.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. Any concerns or questions?
No.
Me either. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Oh, no, sorry. Take that back. I have a 2010 Dodge Charger, and the VIN number on that is a 2B3AA4CT0AH302966. It has 99,777 miles on it, and it's in poor condition.
Second.
Thank you. Any concerns, questions?
No.
Okay, I don't either. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And so that number 3 motion passes. From the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to accept the donation to the Council on Aging of $50 in Visa gift cards and $275 from the Holiday Spirit Committee.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. Any concerns, questions?
No.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. From the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to accept the donation to the Health Department of $300 in Market Basket gift cards and a $50 Visa gift cards from the Holiday Spirit Committee.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. Any concerns or questions?
No.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. That motion passes. On the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to accept the donation of $356.40 in school supplies donated by Walmart to Coelho Middle School.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. Any concerns, questions?
No.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. From the docket of January 19th, 2021, I entertain a motion to accept the donation of 5 trees to the city from the Walsh Perry Partnership.
Second.
Thank you. Any concerns, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes as well. And that is all the business the City Property and Claims Committee has this evening. I'd like to adjourn at 8:46 or call for an adjournment at 8:46.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 8:46. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 8:46. Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinances, Elections, and Legislative Matters Committee is canceled this evening.
That concludes everybody.
Special Committee on Rules and Procedures is canceled this evening.
We are done. It's a wrap.
Oh, hang on a second. Yes, I did. Okay, never mind. All's good. I thought I missed one, but I didn't. Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge the school committee for a minute this evening before we adjourn and say thank you for sending our kids back to school. I'm so happy that they're not going to be home 5 days a week and they get to go back at least a little bit, a couple days. I'm sure most of the parents are feeling the same relief because it's been so difficult the last 2 weeks and it's been difficult mostly for the children themselves. So I appreciate their vote that they took last evening. With that, I'll say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
And everyone. See ya.
Night.
Night.